Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing great during this unprecedented times. Before we begin the session, I would like to thank Airmeet for providing us this platform for handling the Q&A session as well. So we have three very amazing guests today with us, Mr. Abhishek Nayak, Mr. Vaibhav Singh, and Mr. Awais Ahmed. So I'll begin with Mr. Abhishek Nayak. Abhishek is a Pilani graduate of the 2005 batch and has since created and built many successful startups such as Ghar Pe, Clink, Wise Mobile, and Bicycle AI. After spending time as an entrepreneur in residence at Axel, Abhishek is currently working on Appsmith, a platform which helps user build app with a complex workflow without using HTML or CSS. Vaibhav is a Pilani graduate of the 2011 batch, having held the post of the General Secretary of the Students' Union. Vaibhav went on to build Visit with his college batchmates and has been recently featured in the prestigious Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia. Visit is a healthcare startup with an AI-driven platform to help diagnose symptoms, manage lifestyle, chronic condition, and consult with various medical experts. Awais is a Pilani graduate of the 2015 batch who began working on space tech startup called Pixel towards the end of his third year. Pixel is working towards building a constellation of Earth imaging satellites to Earth to detect Earth in real time and monitor and predict global phenomena. Yeah, I would like uh, uh, I would like to host Mr. Abhishek Nayak to begin the session.
Hey guys, hey everybody. Really great to see all of you attend this session. Really excited to talk to Awais and Vaibhav. Awais I've met once before, Vaibhav I've heard and read about a lot. So it's really exciting. And thanks to everybody at CEL who's here. So I want to just start off with like just a brief introduction about what my life at BITS was, and talk a little bit about what my startup experience was like, and then we can take it from there. Uh, so so I ended up joining BITS in 2005. My degree was in bio. I remember entering BITS not really that happy. I wanted to get into an IIT. I'm sure a lot of you did, and I ended up going to BITS literally a week before I was supposed to show up. And my first experience at being at BITS, I remember, was I met this person, and we were discussing BITSAT scores, and I realized that at school I was like a topper, but at BITS I wasn't. And so that was a very interesting start of my experience at BITS, where I realized that the special person that I felt I was at school, that was no longer the case coming to BITS. And that basically ended up meaning that I had to figure out like different things to do so that I could actually stand out and do better. Because it was clear that there were so many other smart people at BITS who were, who were just much better at every single thing that I was interested in. And I remember in my first year, my goal really was to just meet people and have fun. That's what I remember telling my roommate, that that's what I'm here at BITS for. Just like meet people, have fun. Because like my entire coaching institute experience was just horrible. There weren't too many things that I was doing at college. At school I used to do a lot of things, while at the coaching institute, obviously I wasn't doing anything fun. So I came into BITS feeling like a mix of, okay, low self-confidence, as well as like wondering what does life look like after I actually graduate, and what does life look like after I actually do many things. And so my entirety of BITS, I remember, was just like a journey of like finding what is it that I'm interested in, and what is it that I want my career to be in. So because of that, I ended up joining quite a few clubs. Ended up meeting a lot of people like I wanted to. I was doing like quizzing. I was into the photography department. Then I was doing CEL, of course, and all those kind of things, which was like really just a very interesting experience that I'd never done before. Now, one of the things that I learned quickly at BITS was that it was very easy to go and find people who were similar to me, and people who had very similar interests and I had never experienced something like that at school. Uh, I was generally very inclined towards sciences, experimenting, and those kind of things. And at school, like everybody really was studying to just like kind of succeed at exams, but not do that much fun. So at BITS, I started hanging out with a bunch of people who loved building things, tinkering, and they were either tinkering in robotics or they were actually coding, or they were doing something in CEL where people are trying to like start startups or like start small NGOs, etc. Those kind of things. And so just working with those guys and just like being exposed to the world of doing things on your own because you like it and doing that in a big group, that was like a really interesting and exciting experience for me. But through this period, I don't think for the first 3-4 years I was actually thinking of entrepreneurship that seriously. Even though in my second year I'd started coding, I'd actually started building a few apps along with another friend of mine. But I never thought of that as anything more than fun projects to work on and fun things to like just like build. My idea of fun was kind of that. I was never really that good at gaming or uh, didn't have too many other interests which could like waste my time. So I was fairly lucky that I could actually do a bunch of those things. By the time my second year ended, it was really clear to me that academically I was doing very poorly, and I was doing really poorly. First was I gave up. That was for sure. I think I gave up really quickly after my first year uh, when it came to like actually paying attention to classes. The second thing that happened was that I started really questioning like what's the point of all of these things that we are actually learning if it's not something that people enjoy and it's not something that actually helps you figure something out. Like I started questioning the rationale behind uh, just like showing up and trying to attend classes and try to get good grades. That was like really uh, that was like a really interesting experience for me because for the first time since I ever remembered, I went from like being really good at academics to being at the bottom 20% of the class because I was an ACB. And that's when I start. After I got into ACB, I actually took it to the other extreme where I was like, okay, now that academics isn't going to work out, let's actually figure out what to do and what can I actually do. I anyway had a bio degree, so I wasn't expecting to do that well in placements. My second degree was in pharma, which didn't really improve my chances, right? So it was like a pretty what's the word? I guess I was afraid, but at the same time, I also knew that I couldn't like follow the traditional path and do things. So I had to really figure my way out, and that's when I started getting interested in NGOs, nonprofits, started getting interested in the climate change movement, started participating in uh, lots of like these journalist conferences, started writing a bunch, and that's what I started doing. And during this period, my ACB experience just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so come third year, it was very clear to me that if I wanted to complete my pharma degree, I would have to spend an entire semester extra for me to complete the pharma degree. Instead of graduating in 5 years, I would have ended up graduating in like 5.5 years because of the classes that, the courses that I had to finish. And that's the period which I believe like was the lowest period of my life, where I was close to being kicked out of BITS. My parents were unhappy, and I felt like I was learning and doing things in college which would actually help me in the future, but nobody else really believed that. I would go meet the ACB dean, who used to be this guy called RK Mittal, and this guy would like every single meeting he would remind me how useless I am and how there's really nothing that I can be good at, so I should just like give up and do something else. And that was kind of like every single meeting with him. And it basically ended up being that by the time I was meeting him for the fifth time, I'd completely stopped buying his bullshit. I was like, so are you telling me that I'm doing well in all these, in these other projects? I have all these other things going on. I have multiple internship offers, and they count for nothing just because you are telling me that, right? And and through this period, essentially, I came to a conclusion that I need to take like a break from bits. So I decided to drop a semester, and figure out what I want to do in life, because it was clear that if I was gonna continue at BITS for longer, it would have been like hell for me. And my parents were also like going all crazy and trying to be like, hey, I hope like you figure a way out of this poor academic situation that you're in. And so I ended up taking a 6 month break. Uh, Made up some. Basically, I wrote to BITS and I told them, hey, I'm not mentally well. I don't feel like I can continue anymore. So I'm going to take a 6 months break, and I'm going to work and make money, and then come back. And that was the idea. At that point in time, I was smart enough to decide not to drop out, because that would have been just insanely bad. So I was really glad that I actually dropped a semester and did not drop out. And if any of you are in a similar situation and you're thinking about like dropping out because things are not going well at BITS, we should talk about why that's a terrible idea. So anyway, so I ended up dropping a semester. I worked at this place called Bloomberg New Energy Finance, which is a renewable energy division of Bloomberg, as a financial analyst. So started really working a lot on the basically like a lot on the finance side of things, and that's when I started hanging out with a lot of people who are much older to me. And Bloomberg was a very interesting place culturally, because it was filled with a lot of expats. They were all working in India, but it was filled with a bunch of expats. And so I was hanging out with like Germans, Europeans, Americans. My boss was this really nice American lady, as well as like a couple of other Indians who were working with me. One of the things that became starkly clear to me during that internship was that we Indians feel like we have a expected timeline out of ourselves. That by the time you are 21, 22, you got to graduate. By the time you're 23, 24, hopefully like you've gotten an MBA degree or a master's degree, and you figured your life out. And you got to start committing really, really quickly. That's like the Indian way. But here I was hanging out with all these people who were basically like, sorry, just give me. Right, sorry. Yeah. So while I was actually there, I realized like Europeans, Americans, they have a different attitude to life. They didn't take that much pressure on themselves, and the most important thing for them was to really like figure out what is it that they love doing. At least the people I was hanging out with. I'm not saying everybody's like that, but some of these people I was working with, uh, they really like made me think about it. That hey, Abhishek, you're like 20 years old. You got to think about what makes you happy. You can't keep doing stuff that doesn't make you happy. And I remember my boss, I asked her like, what is it that makes you happy? She was like, I just love riding bikes, and that's the reason I'm in India. Because being in the US, I couldn't have like ridden out because I'm from North Dakota. It's too cold there. But being in India, that was like her thing to do, go around riding bikes. So this internship is really where my confidence started rebuilding, because one is I realized like, yeah, I was a fairly hard worker, and I was doing well at the job. Even though I didn't enjoy it too much, there was a lot of like Excel work and a lot of financial analysis, which really isn't my interest or forte. But it paid me really well, and that ended up buying me a lot of freedom, because now it was clear to me that I could pay off my BITS fees on my own. I could actually save money to travel, and I could like do a bunch of other things. So that's really the period when I really started thinking about boss, like what should I do in life. And that's when I realized that okay, I should give entrepreneurship a shot, because that's what really really makes me happy. And that's when I started tinkering with a bunch of different ideas. And during this period, another thing that happened was I ended up traveling to Europe quite a few times, like 5 times to be precise, and all of it was paid by somebody else. I wasn't paying for it. Uh, that's also when I realized that I'm a fairly resourceful guy. There are lots of things that I can figure my way out of. I remember in Sweden and Denmark, where I was there for like 15 days, I'd completely run out of money because my debit card had stopped working. And at that point in time, I simply started collecting like glass bottles and cans and recycling them and collecting money. And that's how I got through like nearly like 4 or 5 days. And finally, I found this kind lady who was hosting me as a couch surfer, who gave me money, and that's when I could like buy my train ticket back to the airport and get out of that country. So that experience really taught me that, yeah, I can figure my way out of any problems really. So that's when I started thinking about entrepreneurship, and I went back to college. I decided to drop my pharma degree, and I ended up graduating in 2010 December, and a week after that is when I started Ghar Pe. But I'd been working on that idea in my last semester. Yeah. So that's really my story.
So many things I could relate to, Abhishek.
I'm sure the ACP bit for sure, right?
So I would like to host Vaibhav now. That's okay, you know.
Hey, hi everyone. It's always great to be, talking to Bitsins and getting back to those Pilani memories. So, to start the journey, it was pretty much similar. I was in Kota before joining BITS, and this was all also to just do well in 11th and 12th, and after that, entire life is sorted. So, when I joined BITS with chemistry degree, I was like, now I'm done. I don't want to study anything. I really want to go to the exams without preparing, without reading a book, without reading a single line, and just see how it is. And that's how I ended up in doing 5.17 at the end of my first year. That was my CGPA, and I was the only one who got pharma as a dual. So I was B2 A5. Prior to that, all that academics, doing masters. My sister was there, and she's there in the year. She had been sending me what to do next after graduating from BITS, these courses. My brothers who did masters from there, and suddenly from a big shock to my family that not getting an engineering degree, and especially from the place I come from, so I come from, my hometown is in Patna. So IIT, AIMS, and the UPSC, these three are the keywords, and none of them actually worked for my dad. So not even getting an engineer, being an engineer, he himself being an engineer, expected this thing for sure. And there was a pretty much depressed moment in my family when I got pharma as a dual, and that's when I immediately shifted from doing Indian Engineering Services, researching for that, to suddenly shifting from M Pharm and everything. I looked up for colleges where I would be doing M Pharm after BITS. So that was the initial second year where I was very still hopeful about continuing in academics. But slowly, the way one of my sisters was also there in BITS, the way things had been moving around, and BITS, if everybody had been, at least till the time when we joined, BITS was more towards, still it is, though it's getting more shifted towards academic piece nowadays. But the kind of flexibility and the freedom and the recognition BITS had outside, from ranking of overall personality development to everything else, it always made sense to me to sort of get the best out of what BITS has to offer, and not just getting into academics or everything pretty much deep down. So second year, I would say second year first, second one, 2-1, when the interaction and everything started, I again started getting drifted from academics. My M Pharm plans also started looking pretty shady and cloudy. And by the end of second 2-2, I think my friends and all also started encouraging me, ki, yaar, I think you should stand for general secretary. That will be a good thing for you, rather than I don't think so academics and anything else has to do a lot from you. It's been good times to all fooling yourself. So I think I had no plans, to be very honest. And I was in Reykjavik, where a president would probably come, or there will be a core group who will be supporting the presidential candidate. So it was pretty much politics driven also from that point of time. So luckily, so with all my friends' support and everything, I stood and I won the election. I contested for general secretary in 13. And I would say that precisely, one spike, I don't know whether it's hard to say in retrospect. Probably you can probably make comments right now, but the spikes which came either upwards or downwards was first when I got a pharma degree, and I was really shocked. I missed it from 3 marks. Had I'm actually thankful that I didn't make those 3 marks. Otherwise, I would have gotten civil, and probably then my engineering thing would have started, and probably family and other would have also forced into getting probably deeper into academics. So that was the first, I would say, element of surprise. And then second came when I started preparing for elections and then when I won, this piece, the election, the general secretary piece, this entire piece of my tenure, I was ACB both the semesters. That's why I can so much relate to Abhishek when he was talking about a catch, pharma dual and ACB. And 3-1, 3-2, both semesters I was ACB, and I don't know how. I mean, I was lucky enough that my pharma prof didn't ask me to drop any of the subjects courses in my 3-2. And after 3-2, when I think after 3-2, one of the most important things which happened with me was an internship which I got in Biocon. And I think I was the first one who got placed 2.5 years before getting, though I was ACB and everything, but I had got an offer from Biocon in my early days itself. So that was a pretty interesting project which I did in Biocon, where they launched a product in India and I was made the entire project manager. And everything was actually working because of the earlier experiences and the, I would say, connects you had in BITS, with the kind of experience I had while working for the Students' Union, and a lot of protests also happened during my time. The mess protest, a couple of incidents. So during that period of time, we also were interacting and seeing something that what we could do from a medical facility perspective in BITS. There was a swine flu time where everybody was pretty much panicking about what to do, whom to call. Nobody was there. That's when we realized that, I mean, Pilani being the best private institute, having the cream of the mines, still lagging so behind in terms of medical facilities. And this is pretty much the case with most of the cities and most of the remote areas as well. So that was the first time we started working on the telemedicine piece. While I was in BITS as a general secretary, there were a few incidents which happened. I was interacting with Apollo to set up a telemedicine portal. It didn't fly though, but we sort of made a toll-free number where my friends who all whose parents were doctors, we asked everybody to help the students, and we highlighted a number where it could just go to the ones who are free, those parents who were doctors, who were from from this field. So that was my first plunge, I would say, into healthcare. Being in Pilani, seeing in Pilani, and the similar experience I had in Bangalore when I was taking my mom for a follow-up case. So be it a rural area or a remote area in Pilani or an urban area like Bangalore, where even for a small follow-up, which was just for a 5 to 6 minutes in Narayan Hridalaya, I had to spend the entire day, like 1.5, 2 hours of going, then 1.5 hour of waiting, and just a 5 minutes of consultation, which could have happened, which was not necessary for me to sort of, be there. Had I been not there, probably my sister and my brother-in-law would have taken a day off to take my mom there. So a couple of incidents kept coming in between while I was there. And I think the Biocon internship played a very pivotal role. Fourth year, I started with one of my co-founders right now, Anurag. We started building some softwares for the universities. We built it for Ministry of Defense, made some money out of it while we were there in the fourth year. Got some interns, and that was the time when digital healthcare, Make in India healthcare, was something which was pretty much in the radar, and everybody was talking about it. And we had few connects in the Ministry of Defense. One of the guys who had done masters from BITS, he had campaigned for me also while he was doing his masters. And after completing his masters, he was there in automation department. So pretty much sorted, for us. So we went there. We sort of acted as a consultant, provided them some good, I would say, ideas on how they can take the paperwork out of it and probably get something, a digital thing in place. And they were pretty much open about it because the Prime Minister was talking about it. And that's how we made some money while in college. And this entrepreneurship was never key. You have to do something. It was all about let's keep hustling, let's keep trying out, let's keep solving. And I was always more of a people person rather than a technical person or anything. I mean, it was more of a problem solving. That's how I sort of got away with a lot of things in BITS. And I still remember I was in Sarla when Anurag again called me and is like, are you sure you want to sit for placements? And these were the times when in Pilani we made some 8-10 lakhs individually while selling softwares which we made from first year second yearites who were studying in Pilani, from Pilani lab. Rahul Banerjee helped us a lot during that period of time when we were selling softwares to ministry. So I think healthcare was pretty much close to me, and that's where we thought, let's see. And the doctor on demand thing, the earlier experiences, so it all just kept adding up, and it was a no-brainer then to not take a placement and sit for this piece. And that was the second, I would say, the second shock which my dad had. He's not even sitting for placements, neither is joining a Biocon full-time job. He didn't do engineering. He's not taking the job which Biocon has offered. He's not sitting for placements. Nothing worked out on his what he had been probably what he had in his mind. And the best part was after I decided to, I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell anybody at my home that I'm going to do a startup. After my sister's marriage in 2015, we started this thing in our pre-final year, at least to start figuring out. We didn't take an internship; we took a thesis, and the professors supported us, all of four of us, me and Rag, Shashwat, Chetan, while we were starting. So apart from me, other three co-founders were also part of CL in Pilani campus. And so after that, I told my parents that I'm going to do an internship in a different startup which is owned by my BITS seniors. Anyway, I've gotten an offer from Biocon. What's the point of doing the internship there again? So I came to Delhi, and we started working on this space. And I would say BITS Alumni Connect and the entire connection which we had been building in BITS had been the most pivotal thing for me. My first investment came from Appsmith India, who is a BITSin, Mr. Rakesh Verma. Never met him before. First time we met him, and the second day, while we were planning to go to Pilani, so we had to keep going to Pilani. We took a place in Noida where we were staying and working, but once in a while we used to go to Pilani just for the thesis piece, submitting it, and probably just having a chit chat over there. So luckily we missed the early morning train, 8:35 train from Sarai Rohila, and we got, and around 10 o'clock we see a mail from Mr. Verma, whom we met the last day, who's the CEO of Mappa India, BITSin, that can we catch up at our office? And then after like around 2 hours or something, we went there, and the first thing he says, we have planned to invest in you. And this was a time when we didn't know what the investment is. We had no idea. We wanted we need some money to sustain ourselves, to hire more people, and probably get the product out of it. But the prototype, everything was done. And within just one conversation, the first conversation also which we had with him was not on the base on investment, but he was kind enough. The very next day he calls us up, and then he says that he wants to invest. My first mentor was also Alagu, who is a BITSin. Never met him before. While he was there on campus, also during his 25th Silver Jubilee, I was there in my 4th year, couldn't meet him. Got connected to him over LinkedIn and emails, and he had been mentoring us. So Alagu is the co-founder and CTO of Blue Jeans, which recently got acquired by $500 million by Verizon. So he was our first mentor, and he finally ended up investing also. And entire thing, I would say, most of the things which we have been progressing, everything came from the Alumni Connect of BITS, and the kind of support we got from Alagu to Rakesh Verma, Mapma India piece, Pritish Nijavan, who's a co-founder of Acmai. All these guys really helped us. So, and during this entire piece of time, while we were making products in 2016, and we were thinking how to use technology and AI to make the doctors more efficient and everything around it, we sort of did a cold mail to Bistone, who's a Twitter co-founder, and he agreed to invest in us. That was like a eureka moment, I would say, that sitting in one of the flats in Gurgaon, we got a reply from Twitter co-founder, and not just a reply, he agreed to invest. And we were like, something good is happening. And then we raised from Kunal and Rohit from Snapdeal as well. So this Twitter guy also invested with Stone. And again, the Alumni Connect really helped, because Alagu and all who were there in US, we didn't even have a visa at that point of time. We couldn't have even traveled for a meeting. But so Alagu also went there, and he met Bistone. So there were a lot of these connects which really helped. And we got interest from Mark Cuban also, who was willing to invest in this piece. But later on, it didn't materialize because of other complications. But so yeah, these spikes kept coming in between, and I'm grateful to this community which has been probably supporting me and my co-founders and Visit, and generally all the entrepreneurs I see around any field. Irrespective which field you choose to, you'll always find somebody who has been doing pretty good in that, who's ready to pull you up, who's ready to guide you, who's always there to make you help you make the right choice. So that had been pretty amazing for me, and that's pretty much close to what we had been doing, and that's how I would say sum it up as how Visit has been progressing. And that's pretty much my journey until first year, second year. This happened third year, the entire general secretary piece. Fourth year, started making some money by doing selling softwares to Ministry of Defense and making the digitization. And then fifth year, we started this piece off while not doing internship. And then after I raised money from Mapma India, that's when I called my parents and told them that I'm running my own company, which recently raised $100K. They're like, hey, what is happening? I mean, there is something wrong. I don't think so. This guy belongs to us. So, but yeah, eventually it all made sense. In the long run, everything looks like, in the retrospect, everything looks like it was meant to happen. I'm glad that I got pharmacy. I'm glad that I stood for Gensec. And I'm really happy that I got that Biocon opportunity. And I'm glad that I lied to my parents in the initial days. Everything seems to be pretty right decisions which I made at that point of time. So yeah, that plunge was necessary, and I'm pretty glad. So yeah, that's pretty much about us. And Visit has been doing pretty good, I would say, and from the corporate perspective and the recognition perspective. So we are only into corporates. I'll talk more about it probably once we start taking the Q&A. But the BITSin journey and the BITSin Connect and the alumni, this is pretty much I would want to sum it up. And really glad to have Abhishek and Awais here. Awais I have met before. While he was starting his Pixel, he had come to my place in Gurgaon. He was meeting my co-founder and we're discussing about it. I think everybody here, most of us would always be fascinated about satellites and everything. But seeing somebody not only doing entrepreneurship, but I would categorize this piece into very different. I mean, the lens is pretty different from where we see what he's doing. And Abhishek was always a role model, serial entrepreneur word. I think this was the. I think this defines him the best, and this is how we also had been, knowing about him, and pretty great things which he did right after the college, and really great to be sharing this platform with Awais and Abhishek.
Thank you, Vaibhav, for explaining your journey and how Visit came into being. I would like to invite Awais on the stage.
Thanks, Vaibhav. That was more kind than it needed to be. But again, Shivans and CL, thanks for having me. I just graduated from BITS very recently, so I don't have as much a nostalgia as Vaibhav or Abhishek do. Maybe in a few years from now. But my story, some parts of it are similar, some parts of it are not. I didn't intend to be an entrepreneur, and that's something that the startup sort of emerged from what I was trying to do. But like the other two, my journey also started with ending up in BITS. I also wanted to be in an IIT, but I was in no way unhappy that I ended up at BITS. I come from a very small town, and I didn't even know what IITs or BITS were until my 12th. And the fact that I ended up at BITS was something that made my parents and the family happy. I had the option of choosing everything but computer science in Pilani, but I wanted computer science. So instead of choosing triple E or some other degree, I said, let me choose MSc Maths and then I'll take computer science as a dual. I ended up taking MSc Maths, and at the end of first semester, my CG comes out to be around 6.8, and then I'm like, okay, now I just need to score a 10 in my next semester, and I would get computer science. At the end of second semester, not surprisingly, it didn't end up with a 10, and that's when I ended up with mechanical. But then after that, I sort of gave up on academics. Okay, if I'm not getting computer science, I'll just go with what sort of comes with it. In my second semester, one reason that led to me not doing really well in the academics and something I have no regrets for is I joined this student team called Team Anand, which is building these nano satellites at the campus. So that was my first brush with a team where, a group of inspired individuals were working towards something. And I was always interested in space, and then joining this team was sort of a no-brainer. After joining the team, worked on it for during the winter break and then during the semester, and academics sort of fell into the background. During my second year, things started getting interesting. I think a lot of us here have Elon Musk as one of our inspirations, and he was an inspiration as well. And in my second year, I entered the room of my senior, Sibeshkar, who was writing something on his whiteboard, and I identified some of the words, and they were related to Hyperloop, a concept that Elon Musk had proposed, which was you have a vacuum tube, and then you have to build a vehicle that could travel at really, really high speeds, a new form of transportation. And we immediately connected. So he was the founder, I was one of the founding team members. We got to sort of start working. And SpaceX, Elon's company, has this annual competition called the SpaceX Hyperloop Pod competition. Now, that state, they built a 1 mile long vacuum tube at their headquarters in Los Angeles, and the competition for teams around the world was to build a vehicle that could travel the fastest inside. Whoever built the fastest pod sort of wins. And we were just a bunch of students in Pilani, had no idea how to go about it, but we decided I think it's a good enough try that we might get a chance to meet Elon. So let's start designing something, and we had no idea what we were doing. But after a couple of rounds, out of 2,500 teams globally that had applied, the likes of MIT, Stanford, Harvard, 24 were chosen as finalists out of 2,500. And Hyperloop India, the team that I was like an early member of, we got selected, and that was surprising. Now, we had this design that was selected to be manufactured, but being in Pilani, there was no way to sort of go about manufacturing. I mean, you can't manufacture it in the workshop that we had in the campus. What we sort of did is, until then, we had a good number of people there. We went down to Bangalore during the summer holidays, and we had one, no cash to start manufacturing. Second, we had no clue how to go about manufacturing. All we had was the design. And then the work there started for 2.5 months. We were fundraising on one end, and we were manufacturing on the other. Somehow we managed to get Hyperloop one of the companies that was building actual Hyperloop in the US, to sponsor us. And so my days used to be the first half of the day, do calls for sponsorship and get money. Second half of the day, go to the workshop and start up get manufacturing. So I think that was a very interesting experience that I would not have got if I was not at BITS, if I would not have accidentally walked into the room of my senior, and we had decided that, okay, this is worth a shot, where universities, world-class universities around the world are applying, and we ended up applying and getting selected. So that experience, where we went from having nothing manufactured to having a completely working prototype in less than 2.5 months, because we had to then transport it to LA, right? We managed to transport it to LA. We presented it to Elon and the rest of the SpaceX team, and that was a very unique experience. The constraints and the challenges that came with operating something in a vacuum tube were really immense, and we had to manage to think from first principles and a whole lot of other things. But one good thing that came out in the end is, out of the 2,500 teams, we stood eighth. And with the considerably lesser resources we had compared to the other teams that won, that was I think a good outcome to it. So that was the entirety of my second year. And obviously, given that almost all of my time went here, the academics fell even in the background. And after coming back from BITS is when my co-founder Kshitij and I, who was also in the Hyperloop team, we decided that maybe participating on competitions gives us these deadlines, and we can actually get some more work done. And so we decided we would participate in another competition called the IBM Watson AI X Prize. This competition essentially mandated that you use any of the artificial intelligence technologies to tackle humanity's problems. And after a lot of deliberation, we decided maybe satellite imagery could be a good enough data set for us to use AI on and tackle some problems which we had first hand seen, right? In the newspapers, we used to read illegal mining was rampant in Rajasthan. Delhi, Gurgaon were some of the most polluted cities in the world, and they were like, 4 hours away from where we were studying. Or every year we read in the papers that pest infestations create havoc in agriculture and all that. But then, while working with different sources of satellite imagery, we realized there was a more fundamental issue here. No matter where we got satellite imagery from, it was not good enough to see certain problems. It was very expensive, and it was not very frequent in its coverage. And that's when we decided that instead of using others' imagery to tackle what we were doing, we would build our own satellites. Now, I'll tell you here upfront that the motivation here for me and my co-founder both was that we loved space. And we had worked on the Hyperloop thing, so that sort of gave us an experience. And we said, okay, this I think there's a need for this in the real world, a much better type of imagery and at a much cheaper scale. And second, this is something that we love, and if we do something, then we sort of don't have to work for the rest of our lives as such. The other thing was, being in India, we have seen ISRO launch many satellites year on year. So there was no dearth of talent or infrastructure or experience in the country to sort of help us. So that was the genesis of Pixel. So this was at the end of the third year, and the fourth year essentially was. I ended up taking the dual, which is mechanical, as I told you. But at the beginning of my fourth year, it was sort of a dilemma. Do I keep my mechanical and spend 2 more years in the campus, or do I drop this and concentrate on Pixel? But during my fourth year, Pixel sort of kept taking off, and we were getting, more and more time was being devoted there. So I thought it might be a worthwhile risk to drop my dual. That way, the ulterior motive also was that if I drop this degree, I will be a dropout, which is sort of cool to have. But I'll also have my other degree, so I'm not really a dropout, as a backup plan, which is mathematics, from where I can jump onto sort of anything, because you can connect maths to everywhere. So I dropped my mechanical there. The good thing was my parents were sort of supportive about it. I called my dad and told him, look, I'm going to drop this and this is what I want to do. And he was like, do what you want. So in the fourth year, even though I just ended up with math, the first semester, again, we didn't have the infrastructure to actually manufacture satellites that would go up in space. So in the summer between third and fourth year, we again put together a team, went down to Bangalore and started manufacturing the satellite. And in the first semester of fourth year, I was not at BITS about 80% of the time. So that's one good thing that came out of BITS, that since there's no compulsory attendance, I could afford to not be in the classes. I'll go for exams, write something, and keep traveling to Bangalore or Chennai or wherever the manufacturing needed me to be. The second semester of the fourth year was a bit more complicated because I ended up needing to having take a thesis to complete my units and graduate in 4 years. By that point, theses has become fairly strict on the campus. You need to go to your department and sign every day and all that. But I still sort of managed to convince my thesis advisor that, look, I'll spend 2 weeks in Bangalore. I'll come back for a week. I'll present to you what I sort of did, which was in most cases nothing, and then go back 2 weeks and then come back again. By the end of the second semester, I was just shit tired of the train that I needed to take from Gurgaon to Loharu and then the cab late night. So I just wanted to get done with that. But I think one good thing that came out was, BIT gives you that freedom to sort of not attend classes if you don't want to and concentrate on something else, which I think both Abhishek and Vaibhav also sort of benefited from. The other thing that I can remember from a BITS time is during the first semester of my last year, we needed obviously money to build and launch satellites because yes, we had put our savings into it, but it was not enough to actually launch the satellites. We were fundraising. And obviously, no one wanted to believe in a bunch of students that they would actually launch satellites, and it was just too risky. One, investing in startups was risky for a lot of people, and then when you put satellites into the mix, it just becomes out of their domain. So we struggled a lot there. But then something came along. There was this Bitsian event in Silicon Valley, where all the who's and who of Bitsians in Silicon Valley came together in one place. And there was a startup pitch event, and sitting in the dorm of my room, I just applied there and we got selected as one of the 5 startups to pitch. And this was in Silicon Valley in the US. Now, I didn't have the money to be able to go there, but we were working with MapMy India on a satellite imagery related project. Just 4 to 5 days before the event in the US, I managed to convince the folks at MapMy India that, look, it's going to be good for you, it's going to be good for us. Why don't you pay us a bit of money or book my tickets and have me send there so that I can pitch there, get some money, and it can help us and help you as well. And for some reason, I don't know, I still don't know why they decided to book my ticket 3 days before the event. And I took off from Pilani, went to the US, and in 3 days that I had sent emails, cold emails to a lot of Bitsians who were famous, Raju Reddy, Prem Jain, and the sort of others. And they were so sort of open and welcoming that just because of a cold mail, they gave me times to meet over the course of the next few days. So one, the event went well. We pitched there, and that's sort of where the first few investments came from Bitsians. And then meeting with Raju Reddy and Prem Jain, both well-known Bitsians. After just one meeting, they decided to invest as well. So I think that trip sort of was worth it, and I think MapMy doesn't regret booking that ticket. And we then came back to India, rallying around the investment that was there. We reached out to a few more Bitsian angels, co-founders of Grey Orange are investors. Now that was interesting because we reached out to the Grey Orange founders because they also had started right out of BITS. And then, as Vaibhav said, I was meeting his co-founder in Gurgaon as well there. So just meeting a lot of Bitsians to just understand how that journey was, whether it's worth it, what it should be taking care of. I also ended up meeting Abhishek in Bangalore, and I was there more than a year ago during that process. So I think two things that sort of helped: one, the freedom in BITS to be able to pursue what you actually like, and second is the community that's here. You can reach out to anyone, and they'll be open and welcoming. And you can go and talk to them. They'll tell you what to do, what not to do. Their money where their mouth is, and that sort of led to where we are. So I think that's my journey. I'll keep the rest for the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. It's really great hearing your journey as well. It's really amazing that in all of your 3 journeys, we can pick out points that are very similar and similar aspects that you're dealt with. It's really amazing how you guys were able to squeeze everything out of BITS Pilani, the campus, and the experiences that you've had here. With this being said, I would like to open the stage for the Q&A session, the questions. So on your right hand side, you have a chat box. If anyone has any questions, they can post their questions there, and we can begin the session. So I'll start with one of the questions that I personally have. Is like, how do you choose a person or a founder to work with? All of you are working with the same people that you have worked with for your first startup from the BITS campus as well. So what do you think makes a good founding team?
Oh, let me take that. So I've been working with Arpit since 2010. Yeah, it's been like nearly 10 years since both of us have been working together. Uh, at BITS, we were acquaintances. He was also in CL. We used to do a bunch of projects together, but we weren't really like great friends. Of course, we used to hang out, have a, have we had few common friends together. But the one thing that I remember why I started talking to Arpit about the startup was he was heavily into robotics. He used to work very closely with Samay, the founder of Grey Orange Robotics, and uh, uh, so I always thought of him as somebody that I really respect and somebody with a very strong work ethic uh, who would just end up doing whatever he said he would do. And I'd seen that at CEL. CEL being a voluntary organization, it's really, I'm sure you guys know this, it's really difficult to find people who will actually commit and get things done. But Arpit was one of them. I was another one of them. So we both kind of had like that kind of mutual respect. Uh, and ultimately, like I spoke to a bunch of people about starting up. Really, it was Arpit who ended up kind of agreeing to it. He agreed to it after I badgered him a lot. The night that he actually agreed, I remember I was living at his home in Hyderabad while I was finishing my PS, and Arpit was working because he had graduated a year before I did. And I basically sat with him and I sat in his room and I told him that, dude, you've been talking to me about the startup, but you're refusing to commit. And so I'm not going to get off this chair till you like commit and resign. Uh, that was exactly like how it went. Because we had been flirting with this idea that, hey, we gotta go do something about this cash on delivery thing that we had been both working on, but he was not committing because he had a job. And remember, this is like 2010. There weren't too many entrepreneurs. I don't think we knew a single entrepreneur personally. We had met people like Raju Reddy. We had heard a couple of people come to BITS and talk, but nobody in our network was an entrepreneur. We knew zero people who had raised any kind of funding. So it was kind of crazy to think that somebody would commit at that point in time, and that's why Arpit was afraid. And so I did what I had to do. I refused to get off that chair. And finally, at 5 a.m. in the morning, he was like, "Okay, dude, fuck off now. I'm going to resign tomorrow, but for now, just fuck off. I want to sleep. Please go." And yeah, that's kind of how our journey started, where I literally kind of had to like arm twist him into working with me. And yeah, and the funny thing is, for our current startup, Appsmith, while I was at Excel and trying to actually do something else, now it was Arpit's turn to come and do the same thing to me, where he was like, "Dude, I have this idea, and we gotta go do something about it." And my first response was, "Yeah, this is not really that interesting to me. I don't think I can do much here. Let me go do something else." Yeah, but he was persistent. So I gave in, and yeah, uh, I guess that's how it started off. I think that when it comes to choosing people, I would say like look for people with really strong work ethic, people who are reliable. One of the things that I've realized that is very very difficult to change in people is like this reliability thing, which is like, are you able to do things that you say you're going to do? Can I trust your word? And because the biggest fights in a startup that begin are out of distrust, when you're unsure what your co-founder is doing, when you're unsure if your co-founder is actually working that hard, as hard as you are. And so the number one thing I would look for is really like that kind of work ethic. And the number two is like just reliability, just general reliability. Can he be the friend that I go to when I'm in trouble? I don't want a friend that I have to support. Now, having said that, it's also necessary that you gotta be the same because it's impossible for you to work with that other person otherwise. So it's like really important to build those things in yourself as well. And ultimately, like a co-founder relationship is no different from any other relationship. You gotta put in the work. You're gonna have tough times. You're gonna have good times, and you just gotta like ensure that that relationship stays strong. And yeah, that takes work. I would say like obviously like it's been 10 years since I've been working with Arpit, so it's much easier. But we still have arguments, and the only difference is that now we know how to have arguments without hurting each other's feelings, and that's again like really necessary. So yeah, so just find somebody, I would say like who has some different skills, who's reliable as well. Yeah, so those are the kind of things.
I think just to add to that, I think the one biggest thing would be you need to trust the other person, because if you don't trust it, then there's always going to be disagreements, and no matter how much you discuss, like if you can't trust the other person, it's just not going to work out. In my case, my co-founder and I, we knew each other for almost 2.5 years before we decided to get into this. Because as I said, we didn't intend to want to start a startup, but that's just something that came out of what we wanted to do in life. But I knew him because we started playing video games and then being in bed and hanging out and all that. So by the time we decided to take the plunge, there was that trust. So I agree with all that Abhishek said, but I think the one big thing is you need to be able to trust that person, that he will do what he'll tell you to do, and that you can just trust him with the work that he's doing, and you can concentrate on your work. Obviously, complementary skill sets also sort of help. If both of you are exactly the same kind of person, then there's going to be more classes, and you don't need two kinds of person in the same startup.
Right, I agree on those things. I think for me also it was pretty much so Shashwat was my wingy. Anurag was also a very good friend of mine. We had done something similar. Chetan was a junior whom I had been interacting, and all three guys were in CL. So from a complementary skill perspective, knowing the current scenario, what I always suggest people that you should definitely have a tech co-founder in place. And apart from that, it's more of making sure that the burden and the struggle which anybody is going to have through this journey is you have somebody who can share it equally. And the trust factor really makes a lot of sense, because while you're developing the product, the tech guys would be working their ass off while you will be just probably thinking what to do next, googling here and there. So that piece will keep changing. I mean, people will lose their temperaments. You should have other people who should lift the other ones. Somebody will be based on, I mean, there will be many more instances where not everybody will be on the same page, and that's where you need co-founders with some sort of empathy as well, who could lift you up, who could give you that relaxation, who could give you that comfort and those cushion as well. So trust would be most important. And from a complementary skill perspective, I always vouch for having a tech in-house. I mean, from day zero, if that could be sorted, and then other ones they just add more and more. I mean, it's more of having a good friend, and who could be reliable, who could be trustworthy. That's what worked with us. I mean, we have a lot of arguments. Anurag and I had been staying together for the last 5 years, and we have been knowing each other for the last 9 years. Similar is with Shashwat. So a lot of things had already been shared together, and that's how it worked for us also.
Amazing to hear that. There's one question that came from the audience is how do you hone your entrepreneurship side during this quarantine? And I would like to make this a two-part question where one question would be like how to maximize your time during this period, during this tough time. And the second would be to ask you guys, how is your company, how are you managing this time? Especially Vaibhav is also, it's a startup that Vaibhav is doing, which like can benefit a lot of people during this time, which is also a question that is brought up by the audience, is how visiting helping people during this hard time.
What's the first question, Shivansh?
So how to maximize your time to bring out your entrepreneurship side? What would be your advice to people who are free during this time?
Who's taking it up first? Abhishek, you're taking it up?
Why don't you go? Why don't you go, Fred?
So this had been some during this home quarantine piece. This has been coming up that if somebody wants to do during this period, how do we start it? There will be market research needed. There will be knowing to talking to people needed. So I believe during this crisis in the history also, if you see all the great ideas, I mean, a lot of great ideas have come through this piece. Even our company started propelling during this crisis where digital health suddenly became so important that from a good to have thing, it became need to have thing. So I'll talk more on how Visit is doing. But from the perspective of keeping your hunger alive, it's had I been there, generally what I used to do in Pilani also is pretty much the same thing, your quarantine while you are, staying in Pilani is pretty much same to what we are right now doing in Bangalore and Delhi. So what mattered to me and what was good thing about Pilani and the accessibility which I used to, which got us pretty much enthralled about it was talking to people in the similar fields. And that is something which does not need you to be going out. So if you could keep connecting with the people and especially with the BITSins, I would say because of the first layer of confidence and the first layer of I would say mentoring and some sort of empathy also while you're not very sure about it. You are cluttered in your head. You're not sure which way to go about it. You probably just know that I want to do something in healthcare. Or you want to do something in this piece. There are things around. You just know 4 or 5 companies in the, probably you name 4 or 5 companies in US and UK that's similar on those lines. We can talk about it. And, that's what I'm planning to do. And the first set of people I would be talking to just to keep sure that my idea gets refined and if somebody believes that your idea shouldn't be shared because somebody will copy it, please don't think anymore. Out of this 1.3 billion people, if you think your idea is unique, it's pretty much fooling yourself. It's idea is never unique. It's about the execution. I would say it's about a lot of bits and small pieces which comes into the picture, which makes it a success. I don't think that talking to a doctor over a home is something which nobody would have thought people would have been trying, or what Abhishek and Awais are trying to do. So don't hesitate from talking about your idea. It only refines. If people wanted to do that, they would have done it. It's nobody's going to copy or steal your idea. I would strongly recommend to keep talking about it and keep refining. And the first layer of people, you should be doing it while you are sitting at home, while you have a lot of time, while you're doing the primary research, should be your bits and network. And I'm very much confident that you'd find somebody in the similar field who would be probably giving you much more advanced experience, which you might not be just thinking about by just doing the Google research. So my first recommendation would to get hold of bits and network and make sure that the idea and the hunger is still there while transforming it. Because for me, these guys were not the ones who told me not to do this. These guys were the ones who told me how to do this. What is the better way to go to the market? What is the better way, or what is the right time? Should it be the consumer side or you should go to the corporate side? So we always took the corporate route. Nobody asked me and told me 5 years back that you shouldn't be doing a doctor on call. They told me what to do, which verticals to start with. They asked me not to start with orthopedics and to start with nutritionists and psychologists where it matters. Where it can be done, you can see early indicators. So I'm pretty much confident on the thing. And similarly, if that needs to be alive, that's the first layer of thing you should be doing. And from an idea sharing perspective, don't hesitate in doing that. Nobody is going to steal that perspective. Now, coming to the second question, how Visit is helping. So there are a couple of things which we have done at from a service level perspective and in terms of integration level perspective. So based on WHO and CDC guidelines, we launched our self assessment tool for COVID, which is live on ACO website. Also, ACO is a general insurance, which is our exclusive partner for giving insurances to the corporates. And at the same time, and this is live on the app also, where you can just have a self-assessment, which is based on totally on the WHO and CDC guidelines. And immediately you can get to know whether you rely on low, medium, or high risk. And immediately 2 minutes later, you can get connected to a physician. And post that, we have partnered with all the labs who are doing COVID testing, all the partners who are in the cities. So there is an entire package of COVID which we launched, from a self-risk assessment to an immediate doctor consultation with a physician, and then if needed, hand-holding you to get the tests done, and the entire piece. So that is something which we launched for the corporates, and we are doing pretty much similar thing with Swiggy and Zomato also. So we are covering all the 2.5 lakh Swiggy on riders. Swiggy launched our services for them, and so did Zomato in the last month. So, and this being a very critical piece where hospitalization or going in person OPD is not being suggested by oneself and as well as the government as well. So digital healthcare and getting an immediate, I would say, next move on your health is something which has really picked up, and we are seeing a good behavioral change in the consumer mindset from it being a good to have thing or just a thing which at times probably we'll use it to a need to have thing, especially in the corporates, which is our target group. So did I answer your question, Chirag? I think Chirag was the one who asked.
So my take on this is just try to get good at something. Pick a couple of things that you are really interested in. Try to get good at that, and it's really easy to freelance. So even if you don't actually have an idea, but you enjoy some one particular thing, just like try freelancing, do some projects on your own. Maybe you're not good enough to get freelancing gigs yet, but you could still do things on your own. Just figure out like what is it that you enjoy doing and just try to get really good at it, and then figure out like does it make sense for a business, does it not make sense. uh, that would be like my best advice. Of course, it's also possible to start businesses where where you're not really interested in it personally, but you see an opportunity. The only problem is like you can't do that for too long. Most entrepreneurs, the reason they become entrepreneurs is they don't want to deal with like random bullshit that the rest of the world has to deal with. Uh, and if you try to fool yourself that hey, I'm going to try doing something because it makes money, either you're going to quit or it's not going to work out because you don't have enough interest in it to actually make it the best that it can be. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I'm not sure if Awais got disconnected or not.
Hey, I'm back.
Oh,
I'm back. Yeah, just I think to answer the question in terms of what people can do during the quarantine time is look, like now there's no excuses for you to not actually. There's two things you do as a startup, right? You sell and you build. There's no excuse for you to sit at your home and build. There's like enough resources on the net for you to learn what you need to learn and just sit and work towards your product or whatever it is. And the second thing is, I think this is actually a silver lining in disguise, where a lot of people are home and they like have no excuses now not to take your calls. And in a lot of cases, I found that cold mails and cold calling usually just help. So reach out to the people you need to do survey with, reach out to the people you need to sell to, talk to the people who are experts in the field, reach out to them because they are also sitting at home and get on a call, understand what needs to be done for the product, and essentially sit and build because um, like you have essentially no excuse now to not essentially do something. So I think this is actually a really good time for anyone trying to do something because there's no good or bad times to raise a startup. Yes, there might be some difficulties raising funding and all that, but if you actually know what you're doing, if you can talk to your customers, go out and sell and build, it's actually not that bad a time to be doing anything, coronavirus or not.
one follow-up question I would like to ask Awais in particular would be, is that Pixel being a space tech startup has many companies that could get into this, or many organizations that can get into this, maybe NASA or other companies. And we have seen companies with big budget come into this privatization of markets, the space market exactly. So, I mean, for a startup on campus, how are you able to build a connection? How will you able to take this forward in such a new field and such an exciting field?
So I think, see, the things that we think make these big organizations or companies really successful, like big funding or a large number of people or a lot of resources, is what you think are advantages. But if you actually look from a startup lens, it's a David versus Goliath situation. These companies, they have so much funding that they don't know how to optimize for keeping it low cost and economical. They have so many people that they have so many different bureaucratic processes that it slows down the entire process. And again, those processes don't enable them to use the resources as best as they can. So the advantages that a startup like us actually has over ISRO or NASA is that we can move much faster than they can. We can take a lot of risks that they essentially cannot because all their missions have to be successful because of the amount of money they're putting in. Again, coming back to that risk thing, we as a startup can look at innovative things that have only happened in the past few years, take risks on those technologies, make it more lightweight, make it more compact, make it more cutting edge. The risk that these big organizations like NASA or ISRO will not. The one thing that they'll always have is big funding, but I think that's where ingenuity comes. If you look at SpaceX, or if you look at essentially anyone, having less amount of resources means that you need to creatively think how you're going to utilize that and build like a better product than what is available from NASA or ISRO and actually do that. And it's like any other startup, space or not, space, biotech, crypto, no matter what niche field, you can't just go out and look at the entire market. You need to identify a particular niche and see whether you'll have an advantage there, whether that's something that these big organizations are going to go towards, and essentially work towards building your foothold there. Once you have something that is irresistibly better than what anyone else is doing, then you can expand from there, which is sort of what SpaceX did, right? Like once they had one successful launch, NASA came to them with contracts, and now their rocket is the workhorse of the US launch vehicles. Similarly, in our case, we are going after a very specific type of technology, building it much faster, building it much more economical, and like we are essentially going out and selling to the customers, whereas in most cases NASA, ISRO have internal objectives that they need to strive towards. So I think the things that actually give them the advantages also become their disadvantages. And as a startup, you just have to be optimistic and see what you can do better than them.
Thank you for the answer. One question that the audience put up was, what roadmap should be followed that turns the idea into a product? So this was initially for Abhishek, and I would like all of the guests to take this up and give their inputs on this.
So here I would say like uh, Y Combinator's advice really is the most distilled one here. Make something that a few people love, and then think about other things. So I would say like uh, you know whatever idea you have, like start working with a few customers, users. Definitely make something. That's really the first step. Make something, get a few users and customers, see what is required to make them happy, and then think about the next steps. In that sense, like startups are really simple. You just gotta like first make a few people really happy, and then you gotta go find more people who are like that.
Vaibhav, would you like to take this?
So,
Yeah, how do we,
Yeah, which one?
how do we,
Tell me.
what should be the roadmap to convert an idea into a product?
Right. So this is one thing which people like us, who are not experienced, really suffer. So we also did when we started this entire piece. But since we started with video call with a psychologist, this is something everybody loved. Everybody will be happy to talk about it. You're catering the social stigma. You're catering the personal privacy and everything. But this was not something which people would pay for, and we lacked this knowledge initially that you should build something which people not only loves, but people not only love, but they're ready to pay for it. And this is where we struggled. One was video call, and second was the least used vertical in medical science, which Indians as such would always cater it to a social stigma and everything. It is always good to get advice from your friend, always good to give free gyans, but how many are then actually willing to consume that service at a cost? So this is where we got a lot of, I would say, press release and everything that BITS guy is, trying to end the social stigma, doing this and that. Everything looks good for the outer world, but when it comes to the unit economics, when it comes to the actual business, it was not working out for us. Video call being itself in 2015 being something not very, I would say, viable. And then with so this piece is something you need to be very sure of. Always try to build something which taking into consideration the users along the journey, as Abhishek said. What we always think that since we are the ones who are starting this company, we are the ones who are building, we know everything about it, sitting inside the four walls. So I should be spending 4 months, 5 months, 6 months building something which I think is going to work. But it has rarely happened apart from, I don't think so, apart from Elon Musk, I've ever heard about anybody who has been so rigid about his idea and he has been proven right also. Apart from that, everybody has taken users' feedback into consideration and they have built along with it with the right time, with the right pivots and at the right point of time. So the MVP, the minimum viable product or the minimum usable product, has to be pretty much taken into consideration with some intuition, but at the same time keep onboarding users, and that's where you would actually lead to a product market fit. Otherwise, you'll just keep revolving around your thought process and your co-founder's thought process, and the reality hits when you go into the market. So the idea should be to get into the market pretty soon, get the feedback, keep coming back and reiterating and reinventing those things based on the user feedback. One all important thing which I would like to highlight is the user feedback should also have an attribution. So a lot of people would want, I mean, probably they'll want everything. So have that sense of mechanism where you can know that which user feedback has to be given what sort of weightage, and what should be the first priority given the limited resources we will be having in the initial days. So that would be my piece. That I mean, for our thing, the prototype was out in like what I think within a month. The first prototype where you could just see a list of doctors, list of psychologists, you can choose whom to talk. So this piece was out, and based on the user feedback, we kept revamping. Finally, it has taken a WhatsApp sort of angle, WhatsApp sort of an UI. But all this happened after a lot of users were onboarded, were shown. We kept iterating on the product from psychologists. We added more verticals, which they were more comfortable using. They were more ready to pay. Then we realized the consumer space is never going to work, especially in the telemedicine at that point of time. That's where we started approaching the corporates from the corporate wellness perspective, corporate employee benefit perspective, and that took us for us. So we never had to spend time and money in marketing in the consumer space like our other competitors like Liberate and all, DocSap, and I would say MFine, Doctor Insta. These guys had been. So we have similar numbers with 1/10 or 1/20th of their funding. So it's pretty important to have a right go-to-market strategy with the minimum viable product and a user continuous feedback loop mechanism, which we had always been very particular about. So that would be my advice, to not spend a lot of time thinking that you are doing the right thing, rather than get into the market, get the feedback, and then probably keep iterating.
Awais, would you like to take this question up?
Yeah, so I think Vaibhav touched upon this point. Everyone has an idea, but then having an idea doesn't mean you can actually do that. What comes next is important. So once you have the idea, like you need to reach out to the actual people who will use it, or rather pay for this thing, because you need to be sustainable. Talk to them, and see whether validate actually that idea is worth pursuing. Once you have enough data points that that idea is worth pursuing, then you start building. Once you build, you don't need to sit 6 months in the four-walled room like Vaibhav said. You essentially need to get out, like not a perfect product, but something that works. Get it out in hands of the customer that will pay for it. Get feedback from there. Build again. Talk to many more people and see whether there's any more feedback, and continue to do that. So I think after the idea is where the fun starts. There'll be days where you'll think nothing is going according to plan, but I think you just need to get down, pull up your socks, start building, reaching out to the people that will pay for it, and keep getting continuous feedback, and keep reiterating, because it's a continuous process. It never stops.
I mean, especially for the ones who are first-time entrepreneurs. I mean, somebody like Mukesh Bansal came up with CultFit, and he just and CareFit, which he launched, which is our competition, was the last leg, which is the last piece of the leg which he added in this entire CureFit journey. So he started with the one which will engage the most, and that's where we, I always give our example that we were the ones who added that piece the last. We started with the least engaging product, which was video call with a psychologist, and then we got a lot of PR. People, you get a lot of social media validation from Facebook likes and comments. Don't get distracted from there. Nothing is going to work unless until somebody, if it's a customer, then only it's going to work. Otherwise, getting likes and comments or Twitter retweets is never going to work. I mean, don't get distracted is what I would say. We started with the least engaging product, then started adding more verticals at how to make sure that it can cater to a larger audience. And then finally, the wellness piece and everything was the last leg which we added. And somebody who has done that, somebody like Mukesh Mittal started with that piece first, and then finally added once he has a funnel pretty much in place. So for first-time entrepreneurs, it's pretty much important to be in the market, take feedback, and then building the product in that kind, because your intuition, your experience is not that big, and it's not that I would say critical, where you are pretty much sure people can. I mean, you're pretty much sure that what you're doing is going to be totally right, 100% right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I just have a point here to make. Like with Ghar my first startup, like during my PS itself, I had signed up 3-4 customers, and the day that I started Ghar like the full time, was the first day that we had a customer. So I definitely didn't take a risk with starting something which wouldn't have a customer. At that point in time, also like our finances were were really meager. Funding is a lot more available today, abundant today. At that point in time, we didn't count on any funding. Our aim was like the day we start the business, like we gotta make money. So yeah, that's definitely the way I was thinking then. Today it's different for me, but I don't think it's going to be different if you're starting out for the first time. You gotta like find those customers very early.
Yeah, we have extended our time, so I would like to ask permission from all three speakers. Is it possible to have an extension of another 15-10 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, fine with me. Fine with me.
We have with sense, man. Come on.
Yeah, we love listening to ourselves talk.
The surprising thing was we actually started almost on time.
Actually, I mean, I was not sure actually when Shivansh was calling me. I was like, "Pata nahi yaar, Good that we started on never has happened in
I
BITS.
mean, yeah, we have to. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a bad habit of starting out late, but yeah, it's engraved in every Bitcoin, I would say. Yeah. So with that, I would like to ask a question specifically for like bit specific is like we have a very isolated campus amongst all three bits campus and amongst other colleges as well. The location is very constrained, and that could bring about certain problems, like for example, infrastructure problems or resources are not available to the BITS
Hmm.
campus. So, do you think these problems hold a big like obstacle for people starting on campus, or are there certain way arounds? Like you've mentioned, connects a lot, connects with the alumni and connects with other people. So, would you say a startup starting on campus would face certain problems or be on a bad position compared to other startups in other colleges?
I'll just
Fine.
take that first because there's been like very good experience on that front here, right? The answer is a resounding no. One is because I think, see, I'm a very overly optimistic person, so I look at the most positive things. The one thing that being remote gave Pilani was the fact that there's so many smart people with not a lot of things to do, which means you talk to them and get together and do cool things that you would not have otherwise. And if you actually believe in the problem and you actually want to do something, those obstacles will not be obstacles anymore. For example, in our case, like if you're building software, you can build that from anywhere. In which case, most of it is true. You'll have like you have cloud now, you have internet now, and you can do it from no matter what part of the world almost. In our case specifically, we had to build hardware that would go up in space. It had to we had to test it rigorously. There are certain vendors that you have to go to with certain certifications for manufacturing. And as I said, in my fourth year, I was most of the time in Bangalore, talking to vendors there and reaching out and getting it manufactured there rather in Pilani. And if you look at Grey Orange as well, I mean, they started a scheme acute, and a lot of the things or components that they wanted weren't in Pilani, but they figured out a way to get it there. So I think, like, yes, there will be certain things where you'll face challenges in getting it there, but like solving those obstacles early on will help you prepare for the longer journey better. But in most cases, being remote has its advantages as well. You'll have a lot of smart people you can talk to with not a lot of things to do, and like you can sort of look at it as a silver cloud.
Yeah, I actually agree with Awais. I mean, I don't think so. There's a disadvantage unless until what you mentioned on those categories. I mean, being there and not really having a lot of things to do, you're less distracted to other things as the guys as in the colleges. I mean, as the guys who are in metro cities studying in those colleges, and you're pretty much focused inside the people, and that's where the connect also really matters post college as well, because the kind of people you interact with post college, they're also doing pretty good, and the entire connect and it has been all about people, right? So I think that really helps. And for us also, I mean, we got the idea from there itself. So you might just, I mean, argue that the since you're not exposed to the outside world, you might not be, seeing a lot of real time problems, challenges by while staying in bits. But I think we all come from that piece, and being there and staying connected gave us that much of real time issues. I mean, it wasn't like we were not aware of the surrounding. It was just like we didn't have enough things to do in Pilani. So we knew what happens outside. We knew what happens globally. We knew what our seniors are doing here and there. And while sitting in Pilani, since you don't have any other things to do, you think about those problems and you start making solutions, start preparing for that. So that's what happened with us, and I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I agree with Awais and Vaibhav. Really have nothing else to add there. You guys nailed it.
Okay, then we can move on to some specific questions that have been asked by the audience. Uh,
Sure.
so, so one of the question is, when should you stop if a certain idea isn't panning out as you envision?
Sure, I'm an expert on that. So let me take that. So I think it's really important to be a realist, and the reality of the world is like not all markets are created equal. Some markets are incredibly difficult, and you're gonna keep banging your head, and you're gonna feel like a fool. Uh, and it's really important that you shouldn't bang your head too many times. So I would say like when give it your best when it comes to like pivoting, trying something alternative. Really like figure out what is it that that the user wants, and can you tie it up with what you think is missing in the world and what you think is necessary to do. So it's really important, but it's absolutely inevitable that most ideas will fail. That's the truth of all of this. And yeah, if you start up, it's very unlikely that everything you're going to do is going to work out. So I think like the way I think about it is like I think of most of these startups and these startup ideas really as like science experiments. And if scientists gave up after the first experiment failed, we wouldn't have made any progress in this world. And the thing about entrepreneurship is that the journey is so difficult, and the reason the journey is so difficult is because people can't deal with rejection. People's brains cannot deal with failure because the kind of upbringing or whatever childhood experiences they've had, they're very protected. You kind of feel like the way I should measure myself in this world is, have I come first? The problem is in the entrepreneurship world, there is no first. This is not like a sports game where for you to win the gold medal, somebody else needs to win the silver medal. That's not the way the business world works. The best part is that everybody can win. And so if something is not working out, then yeah, move on and do something else. That's where I would say like initially when with Gharpe we had some small success, but the next thing that I did didn't work out at all, and it really affected me quite a bit, where I was questioning, hey, should I actually be an entrepreneur? Should I not be an entrepreneur? I ended up starting something else. Ended up going to YC, where literally like I would kick and I would hit an entrepreneur who's on his like second or third or his fifth idea, because that's the nature of this game. Really, like it's a long journey, and you gotta like just keep working on something that's interesting to you, and sometimes those things don't work out. Then you gotta go find something else. I don't know if this answered the question.
Vaibhav and Awais, would you like to add some perspective? Because considering you guys have been working on one startup, I'm sure you must have had various ideas, but you guys have been working on one startup. So, uh, how would you plan out if something isn't working as you envision it to be?
Right. So it's pretty much similar to, I would say what we initially realized, that video call with the psychologist is not working. That idea was not working at all. But it was important to pivot soon rather than just spending more on the marketing and waiting for the right things to happen. And this came when you get yourself out from the dust which comes when you do marketing and PR. And initial days, you might think that it's good, it's being recognized by Times of India's and the Business Line and the Hindu, but none of them translated into a customer. So we didn't have a customer in I think first 3 months we didn't have a customer. The first I was in Pizzeria when I got a message that they're the first customer which has booked, and he was my department senior who booked a consultation. I was pretty much happy that we got our first customer, but yeah, that's how it was. But that plunge we took, I think it was 3 months is what we did. We tried doing it and we didn't get a single customer. And when we spoke to the one who paid for it, which was my senior, we realized that he did it because he wanted us to feel motivated, and he wouldn't do it again. At the same time, we were becoming complacent. It's going pretty good. People have started recognizing we are here and there, but everything is just a waste, in my opinion. Nothing adds to. If something is not adding up to your customer acquisition, it's just. And we are so small to talk about brand loyalty. We want to build a brand and all that, jargons which come into the picture in the initial days. Keep yourself away from it and only focus on one thing, which is finding the right customer. It shouldn't. If you ask me objectively, I'll say 2 to 3 months for something which is not for something like what Awais is doing. He needs to be more patient about it. You can't expect him to be, switching his ideas in 2 months, 3 months. But once you have a product, when the customers are live, they're outside. I mean, you just need to talk to 100 people, and you can figure it out whether they would be doing it or not. That can be done in 2 months, 3 months period of time. So that should be your first. Your first analysis should definitely happen within a quarter after you have launched the product and you have been trying to speak to the customers. Unless until there's something like what Awais is trying to do, or like Grey Orange was doing. So these things you can't take a plunge in like 2 months or 3 months. You need to be more invested in it, and you need to be more patient. But for other things, I would say that's a very valid period of time after your initial MVP is out. You either pivot to a different business model, or all along a different idea. Generally, it takes a different business model because you don't want to give up in 2-3 months. You want to try out other things, which we also did when the first go-to-market strategy didn't work. I would say it was more from a go-to-market strategy. The same psychologist thing and a video call and a voice call started working when we approached the corporates. So we just shifted from a consumer space, spending on the retail consumer space, to just the corporates. And the things which never mattered to us in the consumer space, our PRs and everything, suddenly started working in the corporates because they started valuing it. They started taking us seriously. So the right GTM is something which should be figured out in the early. You should be analyzing in a couple of 2-3 months in the early when you don't have a customer. Once you start flowing it up, then I think the customers will take you through.
Yeah, I think like I am not the right person to answer this because I this is my first idea and this is the kind of idea we have to stick to long term. But here's like we also have had to change certain things in middle, like course correct, so as to say. But the end goal is the same. But then in terms of the camera we're building for the satellite, or in terms of the cost that it needs to be, the one thing that we sort of continuously did was talk to our customers and ask them if this is good enough. If we do this, will you pay for it? Sign MOUs, LOIs, or contracts for future bookings, right? So I think you need to keep working on the idea until you get feedback that this is not going to work out. But before plunging on that idea, as I said before, if you can get feedback that this is something that people could potentially pay for, get out that MVP and then get feedback whether there's payment coming in, whether that's big enough. I think one way to do that is constant feedback. And as a startup, I firmly believe that like you're taking a risk. And you need to have backup plans in place. Like you need to have backup plan 1, you need to have backup plan 2, and backup plan 3 in case those don't work. As for hedging as well as mitigation strategies, because in the end you need to survive one way or the other. As long as you have that, and if neither of that work, it's just that sometimes things don't work. As Abhishek said, more than 90% of startups sort of fail, and that's not because of the entrepreneur or something. It's due to a whole host of other reasons. But one other parameter I would say I would personally see is like if you're still passionate about that idea and if you're still having fun solving that problem, keep at it until you have that. But after a point, you also need to look at whether it's paying for you or whether it's actually logical enough for you to be able to continue from there.
And that's one benefit which we got because we started early, and this is the time benefit which I think all of us would agree here, that the beautiful journey which you cover because you started early, and the kind of leverage you have, it's unparalleled. And because you have time to be spending 2 more months without any restriction, without any some sort of stress apart from anything else, without any other liabilities and responsibilities. And so it's been good 4 years, 4.5 years, which we had been doing pretty much for Abhishek. And Awais also started right after the college. Like while in college, I think Awais you started, right?
Yeah. Last
So
year of college.
this gives us a lot of benefit at the age of 24, 25. I mean, you have already worked on an idea, you have spent a year or more, and then you can still decide whether you want to continue that idea or do 2 more ideas before other financial liabilities and social liabilities start bombarding on you. So starting early has been the key message, I would say. I mean, nothing beats starting early.
I think Vaibhav touched upon a very good point there. Being in BITS and starting while in college gives you some sort of a safety net. And being in BITS itself is it's a privilege. Like not a lot of people
Right.
get in terms of the people you can reach out to, people like a backup net that you have, because you can always say that ye nahi hoga to kuch to kar lenge.
Right.
So that safety net is something that you as BITSians have that a lot of people will not have.
Thank you for your answers. So, like, I would like to end the session with a question related to the current situation again. So, what would be the prediction on how the industry is going to shape in your domains after Corona has passed? So, with your experience of your product or of your company that you have had, and with that, and one more question that was specifically for Awais is that asked by the audience is how has what are the near-term goals of Pixel, and how has COVID affected your launch dates?
Sure. So I'll start with like one is our satellite was almost ready. A couple of more weeks and it would have been ready to ship to the launch site for the launch. But then lockdown happened and everyone had to go back home, and it's still lying there. So the launch has been delayed by a few months, and that just delays us by a few months and nothing beyond that. We just have to wait until there's relaxations and we can go back and test it and ship it to the launch site. So in terms of our development timeline, the first satellite launch is delayed by a few months. The second satellite, we're continuing to work from home as if nothing had happened, and we still hope to maintain the original development plan that we had. In terms of how it's going to impact the industry, in the short term, yes, there's going to be hit in terms of how many people can buy the imagery. But I think for us, it comes at a very opportune moment because more than half of the companies, some of whom are competitors, will not survive this winter, so as to say. And thankfully, or luckily, we went into this with sort of a good cash in hand, etc., for a reasonable amount of time. So I think the good thing is there'll be a shakedown in the industry because this is an industry that needs a lot of money to sustain. So not all the companies will come out of the other side after we are done. But in the end, like the demand for satellite imagery is going to be there. People would want to have a look at how things are happening, be in agriculture, mining, urban monitoring, or other things. Oil and gas might take a short-term hit, because oil price is went into negatives and all that. But in the long term, I don't think 2 years or 3 years from now, there's going to significantly impact, at least in our industry where we are moving towards. But as in every other industry, it has impacted our development timeline. But one good thing is there'll be a shakeout where, and hopefully only the good companies come out of the other.
Vaibhav, do you think in your domain how would this COVID-19 affect after it has passed? Or
It has been a demonetization time for us. If I could just sum it up in our line, and I mean, if you see the stats of US, the funding in digital healthcare as compared to last year, so from 1.3 billion, it has reached 3.1 billion was the this quarter Jan Feb March funding in digital healthcare spaces. So it's pretty different for us, I would say. It's pretty much on the positive side. I mean, it's no brainer. I mean, everybody's talking about it, from the prime minister from the Indian prime minister to the US president to the finance minister to everybody. I mean, so personally, me and my competitors, they had been trying so much to get the regulations out of telemedicine, and none of us succeeded in the last 4 years, 5 years. After the lockdown, within 5 days, they approached us. Niti Aayog approached us, and there was an association which was built: Practo, Visit, and Fine. So Shashank from Practo, Prasad from M-Fine, all these guys. I represented to Visit, and a couple of more companies, DocSap, Doctor and stuff. Their founders. We suggested the guidelines, and it was out in like 5 days. Even the first revision is out. So BCG, after the first revision, BCG has been appointed, who will be getting more, feedbacks on the regulations, how to go about it to make it a more sustainable thing. So the kind of I would say indicators which we are saying and the seriousness, it's pretty different. I mean, it's pretty on the positive side for a company like ours.
Kind of same thing for us. Originally, our plan was to like launch the product maybe a few months later, uh, like for alpha users, but we ended up doing that in the middle of April because there were quite a few people who were like, "Hey, we just need software really quickly," and that's what our product helps you do, which is like make software really quickly. So we're kind of in the market which has always had a upward trend, which is there aren't enough developers in the world and there isn't enough software in the world, and you just need more of it. You need more software and you need more developers to do it. So just being in that space, like, it just has accelerated us. I think more and more, like one of our first users ended up being a small state government, which is completely unexpected. Never in my life I would have ever expected that I would have a customer who's a government. We weren't aiming for it, but it just worked out. So it means that more and more companies are going to be buying software, and more companies want to do that more quickly. And because we're enabling that, that's just helping us out. Yeah. Now, the good thing about the software business is that generally your costs tend to be low. Your gross margins are really high. So I think like a lot of SaaS companies will actually survive this. They might die because their consumer customers die, but more likelihood that software SaaS companies would survive this better than the others.
Okay. I did say I would end the session, but I really missed one question that I would like your input on it. So there was one question specifically for Abhishek. Is what was your experience during Y Combinator? Do you have any specific story or any incident that you would like to share from the experience that you gathered there?
The Y Combinator experience was really fun. It was like being back in college again. It was like a high pressure environment. I was hanging out with a lot of other entrepreneurs, which I have entrepreneur friends, but just being there with like hundreds of entrepreneurs, it reminded me how common we are and how unspecial we are. So that was quite cool because it just forced us to like start thinking of things in a more fundamental basis. Instead of thinking about our difficulties, we just realized like, hey, everybody has difficulties. The question is like, who's going through the wall quicker, and who's doing that. So that was like the fun experience. The most interesting thing that I saw there was we heard this talk by the WhatsApp founders, and just listening to that talk and listening to this dude Jan Koum complaining about Mark Zuckerberg as being a bad boss. I was like, wow, this guy's probably going to quit, and he ended up quitting, I guess, like 5 months or 6 months after that. Because that was a closed door session, I think he felt comfortable just talking about Mark Zuckerberg in a way that could be construed as negative. Uh, but it like I remember talking to Arpit like, dude, I feel like this guy's gonna quit. And Arpit is like, I think he already chhod chuka hai. I was like, probably. And then we found out like 5 months later that was indeed the case. Yeah. Yeah, I think YC is going to be interesting when it's remote, but like thankfully we did it when it was still like offline, and we could all still like hang out with each other and do that. So that was like a really cool experience, just being in the valley and talking to investors, doing that. One of the things that I learned, which I think is interesting, is that American investors tend to be just as bad as the Indian ones, or maybe even worse, because there are just so many of them out there. It literally takes nothing to start a fund there or become an angel investor. So the quality of investors is just like much lower, unfortunately. But the good thing is that there's so many of them that it's just much easier to raise money. So that's the positive. One of the things that I always thought was that, hey, I'm gonna go meet people from Greylock, A16Z, Sequoia, US, and be like, wow, these guys know something that we don't. Turns out not really. So that was a bit disappointing, but that also like was good because I realized that, yeah, as entrepreneurs, like we are on our own, we got to figure things out on our own. Investors are good at putting in money, helping you out as a board member, but fundamentally your business depends on just getting customers and making them happy, and nobody can tell you about that. It completely depends on your team.
Okay. I am actually getting a lot of messages from the CL group to ask me a question that has been asked in the audience. Is the we the third last question by Rohan is like we have seen a lot of Indian unicorns that are clones of startups on the West, and all of the startups don't have a US. Your startups don't have a particular US counterpart or anything like that. So how difficult was it for you to get a funding for an original idea?
So I think one thing, if you see the recent trend, the trend from like Indian startups just copying what has been done versus Indian startups being really original, like that trend has been just increasing. If you look at the number of startups that get coverage or that get funding or that just are in the news today, you'll see that most of them are specifically catered to the Indian market in a way that could not be catered anywhere outside. So I would say that in at least the past couple of years, people have been thinking more originally here. In our case, the fact that we were doing something so risky, but the fact that we were doing something unique that no one else had done globally was a positive factor in going and telling them that, look, we want to build from India for the world. And that's something I think a lot of startups are doing today. And that's sort of the future. You don't need to be in Silicon Valley today to be actually a startup or a unicorn. You can actually do it from anywhere. And that trend has only been increasing year on year.
My experience is that Valley has a lot more copies than India does. A lot more. Like 10, 20x higher. We just don't hear about it. But if you start actually tracking every single TechCrunch article, you're going to see that. And honestly, like there is nothing wrong in being, starting off with an idea which was somebody else's insight, especially if you are bringing something different and original to it. Uh, look at the way the world progresses. None of us like look at Airmeet, this platform that we are using. This platform couldn't have been built if it wasn't for other people's work. And all of us build on top of other people's work. If you're using open source software, if you're a musician, you're often remixing somebody else's work. And that's just like part and nature of all ideas. Ideas just get better when you come in and give in your own angle. So that's what I would say. In our case, like I would say, the couple of my first startup Gharpe, which was the cash on delivery, that was like a cash on delivery pioneer in India. And then the next couple of things that we did definitely felt original. If you talk to talk to some investors or something, but to me it didn't feel original at all, because to me it felt like this is a human behavior that people have been doing for a while, and I'm just trying to serve it. So in that sense, like I'm not so worried about if there's a copy, if there's not a copy. Of course, if you have a direct competitor that you're going after, that might affect you, because your customers won't know who to go for, and you're going to divide up the customers between you. But having said that, like it's very important that choose ideas that you are really interested in, and if it turns out that that's a copy of something else, like so be it. Just go do it. Trying to be original but picking something that you do not truly enjoy is like a sin that's going to come back and bite you 5 years, 6 years later. I remember my first startup, Gharpe, like the biggest reason I sold it, we were at 500K revenue. We had raised money from Sequoia. We were like Sequoia's first ever seed investment. Things were good, but I was just bored. I didn't personally connect with my workforce was too large. We had like some 150, 160 people. I'd stopped knowing people by name. I wasn't really enjoying being there. And so when I actually got an opportunity to exit, I took it because I wasn't enjoying it. Versus, I would say this business and the one that I went to YC for, these are things that I'm personally like really, really interested in. And personally, I used to be consumers of products like this. Like the reason why Arpit started with this idea was we used to pay about $800, $900 for some software like this, and we used to hate it. It was just like so bad at a lot of things. And it was annoying that we had to keep paying them money because we didn't have an option. There was really nothing else that could help us do that, build all these custom tools very quickly, built without like knowing like front end, JS, those kind of things. That's the way Arpit got into it, and I later got into it because I realized that there are things here that we could do which are very different from a competitor. My first reaction was like, if a competitor sucks, how can we be that much better? But that's because like I hadn't thought about it enough. And then as Arpit started working on it, we realized that even though it feels like a copy, it really isn't.
Thanks, Abhishek. I think I'll step in now because Shivansh has lagged out. So I think we've stretched the session out for quite a good duration, and we've got a lot of good responses. A lot of people actually thanking you guys in the chat. So as a closing note, if all of you have a short message for Bitsians, aspiring entrepreneurs, people who are looking for placements, jobs, interns.
Okay. Sure. I think the one thing that you might have noticed that's common between me, Vaibhav, Awais, other than the fact that we got low grades, was that we were shameless when it came to talking to people and contacting them. I can tell you, like, when I need something from somebody or something, like, you're not getting me off your back. It's either going to get done, or 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 you're going to like block me or something. Uh, Thankfully, it's not got into that, but like we're fairly persistent when it comes to. I realize that while listening to all of you, that's something that's common. So yeah, so just be like open and write to people that you don't know. Talk to them. Start conversations. You have this idea, and you need to go talk to, let's say, like, somebody mentioned PhonePe as a large company. You got to go write to the CEO of PhonePe, email him, write to him a couple of times, keep changing that email, get him interested, right? And maybe he says no, but that's where you are today, where you don't have a conversation going on with him. Gotta get really, really good at like contacting and talking to people, and figuring out a way of giving them what they need so that you can get what you need. Vaibhav, you want to take this?
Yeah, I think for me, I've sort of somewhere or the other conveyed that, starting early and talking to people. I mean, don't hesitate in doing those two things. I mean, that's where things will take you to. And as Abhishek rightly said, we are still very shameless when it comes to reaching out to somebody. And things have worked for us. Like Old Mail to Wisdom got us funding from him, and similar with the other guys as well. I mean, and I missed out on the PhonePe thing. I'll take it up. So yeah, I mean, start early. You have very less risks to cater to. I mean, this couldn't be a better time if you have something in mind, and to keep it refining, start talking to people. These would be my two cents on what has worked for us. Especially the first layer again needs to be a BITS alumni network. Tap into that first. You'll get a lot of. You'll get motivated, I would say.
Thanks, Vaibhav. I'm sure a lot of us will reach out to you after this. What about you?
There was a question by Aditi. I'm not sure whether she's here or not. I can probably take it up offline on the PhonePe thing, which is a very good question, I would say.
Yeah, okay. And just on the wrapping note, one thing I would like to reiterate that Abhishek said is one thing I have seen in a lot of startups. It's not the amount of funding, it's not your smarts, it's not anything else. It's your persistence that gets you there. Just need to be at it. Like in my case, I had been trying to get a meeting with Benny Bansal for 18 months before I finally got a meeting with him, but sort of didn't give up. And that's something that holds for a lot of people that have at least gone somewhere, is just need to be persistent. But the other thing that I would sort of say is, in the end, like whatever you do, be it a startup and whether what type of startup, you need to be happy doing it. You're going to put in 16 hours sometimes, you're going to put in 18 hours sometimes. You're not going to be happy. There's going to be days that are bad. But in the end, as long as you believe in what you're doing and are happy actually doing it and you have fun doing it, the journey will be worth it. So I think like whatever it is you're doing, make sure that you are happy and you're having fun.
Right. Thanks for your insights. That was a really helpful session. I'm sure all of the Bitsians here are really grateful that you guys took your time out to come and answer our queries. So I'd like to thank all the participants for showing up, and especially the DICE for taking the time out of their busy schedules. Thanks for attending the session, and I think we'll end it here.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Shivan.
Thank you.
All right. Good luck, all.
Amazing. All the best. Bye, Abhishek. Bye, Awais.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.